So good evening and a very warm welcome to all those present here for today's session. My name is Atul PM. I'm an undergraduate student from the Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering, and I'm a student member at Students Alumni Cell.
Hello everyone, my name is Abhisha Srivastav. I'm a second year undergraduate student from Mechanical Engineering Department and a student member at Students Alumni Cell. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for attending this session.
A lot of us must be considering going for higher education, especially doing an MBA among these. I think we picked up a pretty niche topic, deferred MBAs. And to enlighten us on this topic, we have our three panelists who have all gotten accepted into the Deferred MBA program of the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Okay, cool. So I'll introduce today's panel. Starting off with today's panel, we have Mr. Tanay Jagani. He graduated from the Department of Agricultural and Food Engineering in the year 2020. He was a co-founder at a startup called Infinity Box. He's currently working as a business analyst at McKinsey & Company. And previously he's done internships at Elite and Uber. Welcome, Tanay.
Our next panelist is Ms. Tiyasha Mitra. She graduated in the year 2021 from the Department of Chemical Engineering. She's currently working as a business analyst at McKinsey & Company. Previously, she has done interns at PNG and Nixon.
And finally, we have Ms. Vasanta Majety. She graduated in the year 2021 from the Department of Chemical Engineering. Currently, she's working as a business analyst at McKinsey & Company, and she's one of the winners of the Honda YES Award. Along with this, she's interned at PNG. Welcome, Vasanta.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Would any of you like to add something else?
No, I think that's a brief,
pretty
good intro. Happy to answer any specific questions about myself, my life at PHP if needed. Tiyasha, you're not going to turn on your camera?
I did.
Oh, I can't see you.
Yeah, it's on.
I can see her.
Oh, easy now.
I can see all the things.
Okay. Okay, I guess we'll go on with our discussion in case you don't have to say something. Okay, cool. So we'll be taking up any questions you have for our panelists at the end of the session. So I guess let's start. Yeah, so let's start with the most obvious question. What exactly is a deferred MBA and how is it different from a normal MBA? Tanay, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So deferred MBA is essentially you apply in your final year of college. If you get in, you can defer your admit by a few years. The number of years vary by the school, but essentially you have an admit and you can join after 2 to 4 or 2 to 5 years in the college that you've been admitted to. Most of the US B schools, top B schools offer this program and have more recently started it. Wharton, for example, has started it the year that I got admitted. IMA also offers this. So when you write in your first year of, final year of college, when you're applying, you can defer your admission for up to 2 years. One of my friends has done it. But yeah, that's what a deferred MBA is. You apply, you get an admit, you are free of some of the worries in your head, and then you can join in whenever you want.
Okay, cool. I guess that was pretty concise and yeah. So would any of you like to add something like Vasanta or Tiyasha? Would you like to add something in that or is that okay?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. The only additional point is that it's not different from a normal MBA. So the only difference is when you join. Apart from that, everything else is the same. So that's a misconception some people have.
Yeah, cool. So I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So is there some advantage to a deferred MBA over a normal MBA? Like, why did you choose to go for a deferred MBA? If Vasanta could take this up. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so I mean, the applications for deferred MBA, Atul, can you mute yourself? I think there's some background noise. Yeah, so the applications for deferred MBA happen in like the second semester of our final year. So you can only apply for deferred MBA when you're still a student. So that's usually the time when placements are done and you're really free in your life and you have like nothing much to do. So I think that's a good phase to kind of explore this because when you actually apply for an MBA, for a full-time MBA normally, you apply it while you're already working and the application process is so daunting that it's very difficult to find time to prepare for GRE, Gmat and then sit and write your applications and then go through the entire process. So it's easier to like take it up when you are still a student and you've finished your placement and you have a lot of free time at hand. that was like the biggest reason why I went for it. I had like nothing much to do anyways. I thought like let's try it out. So, but I don't know Tanay and Tiyasha's reasons. So if you have something else, then please add on.
I think the advantage that I can see now is that I mean, there are a lot of my friends at McKinsey or otherwise who have now started thinking about an MBA, right? And US MBA is slightly tricky to get into. They have like typical backgrounds that they look for. There are typical people who they take, right? So what ends up happening is that a lot of people start optimizing for getting certain jobs or for getting certain experiences to be able to get into those colleges. So at least at this point, I am free of those worries. I don't have to worry about, oh, what do I need to do next after McKinsey so that I can ensure a good MBA outcome. I think so. A lot of that worry is gone. I think more importantly, and I've seen with some of the folks from the US who got in, is that they've started up now, right? So there's literally no career risk essentially that you're taking, because if you're starting up, let's say 2-3 years later, you realize it's not working, you have a great B school admit in your hand. So you're essentially hedging the risk, and you're able to take more career risks during the deferment period. So I think those are the two advantages that I see now.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I think one incentive for me especially was that for a deferred MBA, you are essentially competing with people who also do not have any work experience, right? And I think that was a major motivating factor for me. So essentially, when you apply through a general route, you're applying with people who have like a lot of experience, right? 3 to 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, maybe, right? So you compete with them. However, in a deferred MBA, you compete with other final year students. Even though the slots are limited, at least you're at some level of pass. So I think that was one factor for me. And the other thing is how it's like an opt-in mechanism, right? So basically, you have this guaranteed admission, and then after later on, you can choose whether or not you want to do it. So I think these two, apart from like what Vasanta and Tanay already said.
I think just adding one more point, through a deferred admit, all of us can essentially join at 2 years. But typically, what you'll see is people who will go for these US B schools, they'll have 4 to 5 years of experience. So if we do decide that we want to go at 2 years mark, we essentially have a 2-year lead ahead of everyone else. And we would be, I mean, that might play against us also in a way, and I might come to that later. But I think there's just 2 years of advantage that I might be able to gain if I just go right now.
But yeah, like I think all in all, it's like a low risk, high reward sort of situation where like you don't have to give a lot of commitment, while at the same time you have the opportunity to join whenever you want. So like that's I think mostly like the biggest reason of everything. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That was really insightful. So after listening to your answers, I'm pretty sure some people in the audience must be wondering, what are some of the academic and extra academic factors that these top B schools, like Wharton in your case, look for in candidates while applying for deferred MBAs? If Tiyasha could take this up.
Sure, right. So firstly, just to clarify, we don't really know what metrics they specifically evaluate you by, since they don't exactly release their criteria, right? However, what I can say is in the applications, what they ask for a lot of different things, right? So the application is extremely extensive and it essentially encompasses everything, right? So starting with your essays, which have like detailed answers to what you want to do, who you have been till now, what your future path is, right? And different applications for different essays for different schools, right? Apart from that, your resume in terms of like academics, what you have done, what your CGPA is, what your GRE or GMAT scores are. That's the academic part. Apart from that, what extracurriculars you've done, what awards you have achieved, you have received in your life, what internships you have done. It's a very holistic thing, right? What positions of responsibility you've taken, the general CV points that are generally considered in like all applications, right? I think those are the specific metrics. One thing that really like that's different from like the general one is one, your recommendations. So how your letters of recommendation tie into your overall story as to how much introspection you have, how much viewer people have, that also plays a major factor. I think these are the primary metrics which they evaluate. But again, since they do not release the metrics, you can never really be sure.
Okay, cool. Tanay, would you like to add something or something?
Yeah, so I think just to clarify, right? There are certain hygiene factors, right? Let's say good CGPA, good Gmat score, decent professional experiences, right? And why you might see a lot of consulting folks getting in is because that's seen as a great post undergrad option, right? So these are, I think, hygiene factors that they look for. I think on top of that, what I have heard multiple times when I've spoken to everyone is that they look for demonstrated leadership. Right now, this leadership can be across various facets of your life. So I, for example, didn't have a lot of position of responsibilities. I did a lot of extracurriculars in KGP, so I didn't have any PORs. I think same with Vasanta probably had a lot more PORs, right? She spent a lot of time at Alumni Cell. Tiyasha also spent some time at ACell and then decided to leave. But
Let's not talk about that.
But yeah, I think
What are you trying to do, Tanay? Yeah, okay,
no,
go on. Sorry.
what essentially what they look for is some demonstrated leadership, right? And there's 2-3 aspects, elements across which that you can show these demonstrated leadership. One is what is really the way that you use. One is obviously through your resume, the second is through your essays, the third is through your LORs. But what exactly does this leadership mean is essentially, let's say, whenever you take an initiative, right, or whenever you've gone above and beyond what was expected out of you, right? Second could be whenever you, let's say, innovated something, when you've looked at something that's around you and you've tried to improve it, and you've seen terrific outcomes. Third could be how have you sort of inspired other people in certain situations, etc. Right? So there's a few ways that you show this demonstrated leadership across your, let's say, extracurriculars, PORs, internships, all of that.
Okay, great. So Vasanta, would you like to add something?
No, I think that was pretty much it. I mean, see, so honestly, like nobody really knows like what they're looking for. But I think what Tiyasha and Tanay mentioned like pretty much covers it, like CGPA, your professional experiences, your past internships, and your company that you're joining before in the 2 years that you would be pursuing the Deferred MBA, and sort of placement, which is the same thing. So I think these are the most like important factors that they look for. But then it's also depends upon like how you write your essays, your GMAT score, how do you like put forward your application, how do you narrate your post MBA story, which is also very important. Like, why are you doing your MBA is a very big question that they ask, like every university asks, and whether you have a good answer for that, like, do you know how to justify your position in that university? So all of these are different questions, and I think the metrics also change from university to university, but I think this is mostly it.
Yeah. I think just one thing to add is, as Vasanta was saying, I realize is one thing that they look for is clarity on your career goals, right? So they do want to see what is really your long-term goal. How have you realized that this is what you want to do, and how does, let's say, your experience pre-MBA, which is McKinsey, and how does your MBA experience fit in to help you get closer to your long-term goal? So that thought clarity is something that they really look for. And to get that clarity, you should have spoken to multiple people. You should have done your own research. You should have personal experiences in wanting to do something, right? It's not that I can say I want to be an investment banker, but I've not done anything to get closer to being an investment banker, right? So that's not a terrific career story. So they do look for clarity of thought in terms of what you want to do and how you're able to achieve that, get closer to that goal.
And I think one other thing is that
yeah. Sorry, Asanta, go ahead.
Okay, so I was just saying that similar to what Tanay was mentioning, what they also look for is like, how are you going to leverage the fact that it's a deferred MBA? So the deferred MBA gives you that risk appetite, right? So you already have an MBA in store for you. So you can literally do whatever you want in the next 2 years before the MBA, 2 to 4 years before the MBA. So how are you going to take advantage of that ability of taking risks that the university has provided to you? That is also another thing that they look for. So I would be maybe very skeptical to start up on my own if I were not having that MBA option. But then now that I have it, I know that even if it goes south, I can take that option and just exit. So how are you going to leverage that risk? So why deferred MBA is also another question that they ask. So if you have a good answer for all these questions, then you make a complete profile. Yeah, Tiyasha, please go on.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add, so when you say that they want clarity in like your future goals, it does not mean that you have to say, okay, in 5 years I want to do exactly this, and then in 10 years I want to do exactly this, right? That's not what they are looking for, and your career goals might evolve, right? But they want to know if you have a broad destination in mind, right? Is there something you're really passionate about that you've shown, and why you want to explore that? It does not really need to be like, okay, I have to become this one specific company, one specific CEO or something, right? That's not the clarity they're looking for. Just to clarify.
Yeah, because I and Tiyasha can very well resonate to that because we really don't know what we want to do with ours. So it's okay to not know, but it's okay to know that this is like in the ballpark of what you want to do, and this is how an MBA will surely help you to get there. That is more of the answer that they're looking for.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was like a really interesting answer because yeah, that was a new perspective for me personally. So yeah, I do have a follow-up question though. So what according to you guys is the ideal time to start preparing for one of these deferred MBA programs?
Maybe right now.
Like right.
Yeah. Let's not ask Tiyasha that question.
Let's not go there.
Okay, so I started preparing in the second week of February, and I gave my GMAT on 1st of March. So it gave me like 3 to 4 weeks of preparation for my GMAT, and I started preparing my applications only like after I gave my GMAT. And I think the timeline was very crunched and very stressful. So it will be better if you start off as soon as possible if you're like thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I also sort of procrastinated a lot, but luckily my application year was the first COVID year, so they extended the timelines by 2 months. So luckily I had enough time. I took my GMAT in mid March, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to. I think what the deadline was like 28 March or something, and like I'm not going to get there. And then they extended the deadlines, so that worked out well for me. But I think if you're in your final year, I think as Vasanta mentioned, just start now. If you're in your pre-final or before that, I think just after your placements, take 3-4 weeks and use that Jan first second week is when you should typically first second third week is when you should give your GMAT. You should have given your GMAT by now. And if you've done that, you should spend at least 1.5 to 2 months on applications, essays, resume, letter of recommendations, all of that. So now is a great time if you haven't started yet.
Yeah, well, guys, if you have not started, don't freak out. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. We all started late. We
Yeah.
understand that after December's placements, it's very difficult to pull yourself back together and start something else again. But it's okay. Like I still think that you should give it a shot because it's really like it might feel like you need to pay like 20,000 to give GMAT, and then you need to pay like 10-12,000 for every application. It's a lot of money, but once you start earning, it'll not feel like a lot, and I think it's a good out for you, right? I mean, you don't really have a lot to do right now, so it's a good option. And if you start like right now, then I think what you should do is you should focus on your GMAT prep and application prep at the same time. You shouldn't like procrastinate your application prep, which is your essays and recommendations, for after you write GMAT. I think that was a mistake that I did, but I think you should not do that. I mean, Tanay and Tiyasha, you can add.
I mean, so I would recommend people not do what I did, right? At all. So I essentially gave my GRE, I think I gave my GRE on 16th or 17th of March. The voting deadline was on 23rd, and I did not get my official scores by then, right? So I just got the unofficial numbers. I had to mail them and say, okay, look, these are my unofficial numbers. I'll give you the exact percentiles once I get it, right? Because I gave it at the last possible date. And that's when I started my application like 1 week before, right? So not recommended to anybody. Please start early. Please don't procrastinate that much.
And
So I
just
guess
to put that into context, usually in the normal application cycle, people start prepping 3, 4, 5 months before they have to submit the applications. So yeah, it's a lengthy process, but a fruitful one.
okay, cool. So I guess we can move on from here. So now we basically discussed the ins and outs of a deferred MBA, and I'm pretty sure that people are kind of guessing at is the exact process to getting into one of these deferred MBA programs? Like, Tanay, could you take this up?
Sure. So there's a long application process. You can go on their website, even if like you're not in your final year. You can look at what exactly do they look for. There are a few things. They want your resume. There are certain essays that they have, maybe 250, 500 word longs, and these essays vary across different schools. One thing that most schools look for is, why do you want to do an MBA? Why do you want to do it from our school? Other than that, they might have certain specific questions where they might ask for what leadership have you demonstrated, all of these things. One thing that you're really proud of. Some schools might ask, what are your pre MBA plans, professional plans. Other than that, there's obviously letter of recommendation. So most schools will ask two of your mentors to write recommendation letters for you. So that's one thing. But I think you can just go on the websites, look at exactly what they want. There's a long form, and you'll be able to see what is it that they want.
Okay, cool. So Tiyasha or Vasanta, would you like to add something, or is that no?
No, I think Tanay pretty much covered it. I mean, every application is different, right? I think
Yeah.
the questions is something you should look into like beforehand, just so you can start mentally preparing. So I'll tell you, the most daunting part about these essays is not like writing them and like refining them a lot. It's more about thinking what you will write, right? And just crystallizing that thought, just thinking about what you can put on, what are your goals, right? What have you done till now? Who are you? These questions can be extremely tiring, and there are a lot of them and asked in like a number of variations, right? So I think the first thing anybody who's applying should just go on these websites, look at what the materials they need, start asking for recommendations at least a month early, and start crystallizing your thought around these essays. And after that, like, you can just start the application slowly. That's fine.
Okay, cool. Vasanta, anything?
No, yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, cool then. So yeah, so I do have like a follow-up question. So I'm pretty sure there are people in our audience who kind of are wondering whether their GPA is good enough to get into one of these schools, and whether a high Gmat or GRE score will compensate for like a low GPA. So would you like to take this up? Like,
I think both of these women had high GPAs. So let me come in. I think I had a 8.4. I think 8 plus should be good, right? As I mentioned, they do look for some hygiene factors, and 8 plus is decent. Although I do know some folks with, let's say, 7.5 who've gotten in, not into deferred programs, but generally like programs into HPS, SWOT, and etc. with 7.5s also, but difficult to break in. And a good Gmat can make up for it. I didn't have a great Gmat also, but yeah, a good Gmat score can make up for it. But good to have 8 plus. If you're in your second, third year, you should at least aim for 8 plus. That will help you not just in these applications, but like otherwise also.
Maybe I'd like to add something here, but Tanay and Tiyasha, correct me if I'm wrong. So nobody really knows whether a GMAT score can make up for a GPA, or whether they look for very high GPA, or whether they reject low GPA like abruptly. So we don't really know. But what I think, logically makes sense is, if you have a low GPA, then you should have a very good reason as to why it is low. So, I mean, if you have spent most of your time on your campus starting up, and if you've done something very fruitful with your time while not studying, then it makes sense to have a low GPA. So if you have a very good reason for that, then hell, why not? So every MBA application has a question like, is there something else that you would want us to know about you? So you can just write there, like, I know that I have a low GPA, but I think like I have justified. I mean, not in the exact same words, but you have an option to like express yourself and tell them about why you really deserve that chance of doing an MBA from XYZ school, right? And I think if you have a good reason to justify that why you have a low GPA, then that's good enough.
Right. Just a caveat to that. So in that question, right, if they ask if you have anything additional to add, sometimes people make the mistake that they try to give excuses for their low GPA or excuses for something, right? And that's not what they are looking for. If it's a genuine reason or if it's coming through your essays, something like that, it's part of your story, then it makes sense. But an excuse will kind of play detrimental. So it's like a double-edged sword in that itself, yes.
Totally agreed.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I kind of listening to your conversation, I kind of like had a question. It's kind of like, imagine you have like a really low GPA and also you kind of had like a terrible GMAT score, but you kind of started up, or you have like one of those cultures, you've exhibited leadership in some other way that's really huge. So would that kind of get you preference, or?
I mean, it's a holistic application, right? And since like the application criteria is a black box, nobody really knows what they see, to be very honest.
Yeah. But I think my sense is, from what I've seen, there were a few people in my batch who had applied, and they were also applying very last minute. They took their GMAT, the score wasn't as good. Otherwise, things were very, very good on their profiles. I think they didn't get an invite, right? So I think from what I know, at least a good GMAT is a hygiene that they look for, and might eliminate you if that's not the case.
Okay, cool. Would anybody else like to add something, or like final verdict?
No, I think the GRE or GMAT score is like kind of important, right? Because like from when I got the callbacks, like even when I didn't spend a lot of time on like any of the applications, most schools gave a callback. Simply, I think one of the reasons could have been the GRE score. Like, so I think that is a big criteria, at least for the initial evaluations.
Okay, cool. So now that we are on the topic of GMAT and GRE anyway, I think it would be great if you could enlighten us on some of the key differences between the two exams and how it's kind of, how to prepare for those. Kind of get it. Yeah, so Vasanta or Tiyasha,
I think
start us off.
Tiyasha would be able to answer that question better. So I did not really evaluate the two options. I just asked Tanay, what did you give? He said, I gave GMAT. I said, okay, I'll give GMAT too. And I just started preparing. I didn't have any time to like think beyond that, but I'll ask Tiyasha to like take this question.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, right? I primarily procrastinated a lot, and then I had a time crunch as to which exam I should give out of these two, right? So I thought, like, I knew GMAT was the more popular option, and I looked through like the syllabus, what the exam pattern was for either. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what the exam pattern was, right? And some key differences which I found was that GRE is primarily vocabulary heavy, while GMAT is more like logical, and it has a lot of, like, you can just go into their website and see the exam pattern itself, but it's more grammar based, more logical, and all of that, right? The second factor was that GRE essentially had 2 essay questions in it. And apart from that, you could like essentially go back within the questions, right? So within a section, you can distribute your time accordingly. You can go back to the questions. And I think with GMAT, you essentially have to move forward constantly in a question, right? So but you cannot go back for revision, right? And revision is something which I prefer to do in general for these exams. So I think those 2 factors. And I felt that when I gave a GRE mock test, I was getting a decent score. So I felt like that is something that would take me less time to prepare, given like my current preparation level. So that's why I went ahead with GRE.
That sounds way easier. I would have done that too. So how typically GMAT happens is it's an adaptive test. So the first question you answer, based on that, if it's correct, they give you a tougher question the next time. If it's wrong, they give you an easier question. So it's an adaptive test. If you keep getting it right, you will keep getting difficult questions, and hence your score will be higher. So that's the reason why you can't go back on a question as well. I'm assuming GRE is probably not adaptive.
No, GRE is section adaptive. So essentially, you have the first section, right? If your first section goes well, your next section which you get, either it's verbal or mathematics, right? Then you get like a difficult section. And if your first section does not go well, then you get it. But internally, it's not question adaptive. It's section adaptive. But I know.
Any other additions or something? Or
I think it also depends on how much you want to write. I think GMAT has like one writing section, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it has one.
Yes. GRE has 2, and it has 2 right in the beginning. So you have like 2 30-minute essays right at the beginning, after which your actual test.
So in GMAT, you get to like choose which section you want to attempt first and which section you want to attempt last. You have that choice. So that is one thing. And I think GRE and Gmat also differ quite a lot in the kind of questions they have on English or verbal. I think GRE is more vocabulary oriented, while Gmat is more grammar oriented. So that is another difference that I've heard. But yeah. So if you think that you can remember the meanings of a lot of words and you can understand like vocabulary very clearly, then you can go for GRE. But if you are very good with grammar rules and if you can like work very well with sentence structure and everything, then you should like prefer Gmat. But yeah, that is another difference, I think.
Yes, and the advantage there in GRE is that if you have like a strong set of like vocabulary, right? So there are like few words, like 1,000 lists or something, right? If you're confident in those, at least you know one section will go well because they are just variations on the same thing. So I think that is one big advantage which I felt GRE had.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, yeah. So I guess it's more related to your skill set as to which you'd rather prefer to attempt, right? That's what
Exactly.
I guess is the conclusion of this conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so the thing is, right now there's this whole trend about kind of hiring counselors to get into top B schools, right? So do you feel like a counselor is necessary?
You mean a
for one-
consultant, right? MBA
Yeah,
consultant.
yeah, basically.
Okay, I did not hire one because they're very expensive. Okay, so they charge you like 60,000-70,000 for one school to write an essay or something for one school. But I don't know, like Tanay, Tiyasha, do you think it's good enough? I did not really feel
I didn't hire
the
one
need for
either.
it.
I didn't hire one either because
Yeah.
it was way too expensive.
So
Yeah,
Tanay
so-
introduced me to this application called Applicant Lab. I think you should all note it down. So we just use that. I think Tiyasha also used that. So it's a
So
very
I
good
tried
tool.
using that.
Yeah.
I tried using that. I did not succeed. So I just left it after a while because that whole. So I think there's a pattern to applicant lab. For some people, it works really well. That whole interactive way where you make the essays. For me, I could not really figure it out like properly. I don't think it was helping me. So I thought introspection would work better for me. But again, it differs from person to person.
Yeah. Tanay, sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, no. So I spoke to multiple people who had applied, who had gotten in, and mostly all of them had taken consultants, right? And I do think that there's value, right? Because what they do is they help you think through your different stories and how all of that will essentially tie in together. So they do a lot of that work for you in a way. So hence they charge as much. I did think that maybe there's some help that I do need in terms of structuring what exactly are they looking for, and hence Applicant Lab came in. It's essentially a tech platform which is founded by an ex-HBS alum, and what she's done is whatever information that's redundant. Let's say there's information that some consultant is going to give to all three of us. She's put that into like videos and blogs, etc. And that's very specific to each essay. This is the structure that you should follow. This is how you should write all of that. So that really helped me, and it was cheap only. So
Yeah.
I absolutely loved the platform. I think Tiyasha, why you probably didn't like it is because you also didn't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
It does require time. There's a
Yeah.
process that she wants you to follow
Yeah.
through the platform, and I found it to be pretty helpful. Super cheap. I think it was some $250-300 odd.
Yeah.
So
24,000.
I loved it, especially like when I know that let's say abhi nahi hua, to I'm going to reapply again, and then maybe I might take a consultant. So that way I thought it was super helpful for me. I mean, I'm not getting anything out of it by recommending it to all of you, but I think it's a great option if you're considering applying. You can check that out. But yeah, I do see there's some value, but I think that all of the value has been uh, uh, sort of contained well in that platform.
I agree. I found it very helpful too. So they provide you help from like starting from how to answer every question that they ask on the application to your essays, to how to choose your recommenders and how to train your recommenders to give you like proper recommendations which will help you out really well, and then how to prepare for interviews of each school. And it's a school specific help, so it kind of helped me too. And it's much cheaper than how much a consultant would cost you. So it was very helpful. And like Tanay said, I and Tanay were not getting anything from like promoting the platform. So yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
was
I
good.
guess this is not a sponsorship, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
cool.
it's not.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so I think the cost of an MBA is a really popular question that deserves to be addressed. Also, if you know of any scholarships related to those, you could mention those too. So, yeah, how much does it cost and general
If someone finds out,
numbers?
please let us know as well.
Yeah, number crunching.
Yeah, I think the total cost varies between $220,000 to $230,000 to $40,000. That includes tuition fees. Tuition fees of that would be 150, 160K. And then there's living expenses, all of that. That adds up to 230, 240. At least for the top 3, 4, 5 B schools. And that's how much. That's 1.7, 1.8 CR. There are scholarships, and scholarships vary by the school. So HBS has a need-based scholarship. They will look at how much we've earned, how much, let's say, family income we have, and most Indians will typically end up getting anywhere between $40,000 to $70,000 scholarship. Wharton has a merit-based scholarship, so they will. So we didn't apply for any scholarship right now, but the year we will join in, that is when we will apply. We'll say that this year we are planning to join in, and they will compare our profile to everyone else in the batch, and they'll tell us whether or not we are getting any scholarship. So some schools have merit based, some schools have need based, some schools have both. There are some schools that have like fellowships. So Stanford has a Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani fellowship, so they take care of entire tuition fees that they give to tip some Indian students, 1 or 2 Indian students. So varies by the school. You'll be able to find that information online, but typically what I've heard is that people get anywhere between like 40 to 70, $80,000 scholarship. That's 30 to 50% of their tuition fees.
Okay, nice. This thing I was wondering about, you mentioned merit-based scholarships, right? So is that just academic or like something else, like extracurriculars or something related to that?
I am not sure what they look for. So I haven't deep dive into it. I don't know what they look for, but I really don't know. I think it's probably going to be like a culmination of what all you've done, professional experiences, personal experiences, all of that.
Yeah, cool. So like an overall,
yeah,
if you're good for it kind of vibes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Okay, so right now we are in the midst of the pandemic, right? And a lot of us kind of spend a few years kind of graduating through the pandemic. So considering the harsh criteria of these colleges, do you think like COVID grads will kind of get less preference if they're applying for deferred MBAs?
I didn't really get the question, like less preference compared to whom?
Like
you're competing with other people on your batch, right?
Yeah.
When you're applying for them. So everybody is in the pandemic. I didn't get the question.
That's true too.
Yeah, so everyone has had the similar experiences. So the benchmark is the same.
Yeah.
Okay. So nice. So what we kind of meant was like, these started out like in what, like Tanay mentioned, I think Wharton started it out in like 2020, right? Like when he was doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that was like when the pandemic started out too. So right now you have people who are kind of spending their time at home on the screen and stuff like that. And do you think like they would kind of shift from these deferred MBA programs because of the pandemic? That's more of the lines we were thinking.
I honestly don't think they're related. So, I mean, yeah, it shouldn't matter because the whole advantage of being in a deferred program is that you compete with people at the same level and at the same experience as you. So everybody has been through the same thing. So it shouldn't really make a difference.
Okay, yeah. So now that we've kind of discussed more stuff related to this, are there some resources related to preparing for like a deferred MBA program? If you could kind of suggest it, like Tanay kind of suggest one already. So could you kind of move on?
Honestly, Google is your best friend. Everything you need to know is probably available there, especially like starting with how to structure your essays, what are the different sample essays that are available, what are the statistics, what do they look for. I think people have written a lot of blogs and you just Google stuff and understand. At least that's what worked for me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a Reddit sub R MBA, which is very, very good. I found it to be very helpful. There were other people. I remember posting about So Wharton has a GD, and I posted about if anyone's up for a GD mock, and I found 5 other people. 6 of us did a mock, and all 6 of us got in. And these were people from all across the world. So I found that to be very helpful. Obviously, there are resources on Google, etc. A lot of people have written blogs. For applications, I found Applicant Lab to be super helpful. What I found super helpful was also reaching out to people with similar backgrounds who had applied, asking them what was really your story that you had put in. So I spoke to a lot of people. Since I had 2 extra months, I just reached out to lots of people from consulting backgrounds, from IITs, bits, etc., who had applied and gotten in. So doing that primary research, speaking to people, thinking through their experiences, really helped me also.
I pretty much reached out to Tanay.
So did I. Like, Tanay, what should I do?
Yes,
Tanay,
exactly.
can you please read my essay? Can you help me out? So, yeah. But yeah, I think the prep can be like divided into 2 parts. One, the prep for Gmat or GRE, and the part 2 is like prep for the applications. For Gmat or GRE, I can speak about Gmat because that's the only thing that I prepared for. There's pretty much like standard preparation materials available. So there's something called the official guides. So that is like something that everybody follows, and you should definitely do it too. It's a question bank with like I think around 2,500 questions. So you can like practice from there for the different sections that are present. And that's I think the most standard guide that everybody follows. And for me, the most difficult part of GMAT was the verbal section, since I hadn't like practiced English official, like how do you speak it like properly with all grammatical rules followed for a long time. So it was very difficult for me. I think Manhattan prep materials, Manhattan guides for English were very helpful for me. And these two were like more or less what I followed. And I think I did not have a lot of time to venture beyond these materials anyway. So I think you should start from this place. And when it comes to the application prep, I think Applicant Lab was the primary source of all information that I relied upon. And more than that, like Tiyasha mentioned, Google is like your best friend. So just type in the essay that you're trying to answer, and you'll find like a lot of like sample examples that are given by different websites over there. And each MBA consultant has a website of their own, and everybody would have published sample essays on how to answer that particular question. So you can refer to that. And I think one other thing that really helped me was like free consultations. So every MBA consulting company gives like at least one free call so that you can like leverage or understand like how their service would be like. So I booked around 5 to 6 free calls with different MBA consulting groups, and those free calls you can really discuss anything. It doesn't really have to be whether or not you would take their consulting offer service. It could just be about your profile, your essay, whether it makes sense, whether it puts everything in line. So I leveraged those free calls as well. And I think that was one other resource that I used. But that was pretty much it in the limited amount of time that I had to leverage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so
for me, the application process, like Vasanta said, right, 2 parts. With GRE, again, completely, if somebody's planning on giving the GRE, completely rely on like the official guides. They are the best. Even the official mock tests are like probably the best. So those are the primary resources, right? You complete all the official guides. After that, there was this one app. So I think this one app, I think GRE Vocabulary Builder, it's like a mobile application. I think that's probably something I really recommend to everybody because it's like a game sort of thing, but it constantly keeps you in touch with the vocabulary. So I think that is one thing that really helped me for the vocabulary part. Apart from that, there were free tests available online, free mock tests for GRE. So you can give those depending on like what your preparation level is. So that is for the GRE part. For the application part, I think again, introspection is probably key and like reading all of these different essays. But I think one thing which helped me was I took advice from like people who really knew me well, so my friends, and they probably read my essays so many times just to say ki whether or not it's coming out like me, right? And I think getting inputs from people who really know you is also something that really helps to understand whether or not it's sounding authentic, if there are any problems, right? Apart from like the correction part of it, just the story, if the story is coming across. And because they give you like proper feedback, right? Like feedback in terms of what it sounds like. I think that's also something that really helped me.
I guess that's everybody. So yeah, this question's kind of informal, but what is the one thing you'd kind of change if you kind of got to apply again for your MBA? I think Tiyasha really wants to
Tiyasha's
answer this.
you all.
Yeah, Tiyasha really wants to answer this.
I mean, I would change so many things, right? The first thing I would change is when I start preparing, how I start my application process, how early I start my application process. I think the entire approach for me, it was very unstructured for like the first few schools because it was all so hectic and I probably would not have procrastinated as much. Which is why I tell everybody, please start early. Do not delay it so much because it gets very stressful at the end.
Okay, cool. Tanay, would you like?
Yeah, I think I did, luckily with the COVID extension that I got, I didn't have enough time in my hand, but I think I applied to way too many schools. I applied to 5-6 schools. I shouldn't have applied to schools that I knew I'm not going to go to. So what ended up happening was that because I mean, there was a lot of time crunch since I was applying to 6 schools in 2 months. I mean, there were errors in my applications that I later found out. So I got rejected at MIT and I was like, wait, what is happening? And then I saw that there was an entire section of the application that I missed filling out. So they had asked for like extracurricular activities and stuff like that. And I just skipped filling that out. So I wouldn't apply to as many schools, maybe 3-4, and just schools that I know that I'll go to if I got in.
Okay, great. So Vasanta.
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question for me to answer. Like, what would I have done differently? I mean, I applied only to like 3 schools, 4
Vasanta
schools.
is so perfect. She's like, I don't know anything.
No, it's not that. Like, I mean, with I obviously like second Tiyasha, start early. I started late and it kind of blew up in my face. So yeah, start early. That's definitely one advice. And the second thing is like, don't try to sound too perfect. Like what I tried to do was like, एकदम tailor my every essay to exactly what the school is looking for, that I stopped sounding like myself and I started sounding like every other candidate that would have applied to that school. I think that was a mistake that I made. I mean, it's okay to have a different sort of path and it's okay to show your individuality. It's okay to show like it's okay to not be like completely thought through about everything. I think I'm not sure if you guys can understand, but it's okay to not like be the exact route that every college would want you to be. So I was like spending too much time and effort into trying to put everything in line. Keep what I've done in my past, what I want to do in my MBA school, and what I want to do post MBA into one straight line. That it stopped sounding like myself and it started sounding like someone entirely different. And I think that kind of like worked negatively for me, and I think nobody should do that.
Okay. So yeah, so as far as I got from this conversation, I feel like authenticity is something that's really important to these applications, right? Over being perfect, as far as I've interpreted from this.
Yes, and that also comes across in the interviews, right? So in the interviews, when they talk to you and they try to understand you, the kind of examples you give, like for example, when I gave like a lot of dead stock examples, right? That came out in my essays as well because the stories were related. If you sound very different from your essays in your interviews, especially if it's not a blind interview, then that might affect you negatively. So that's also there.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I have one more question for you guys. Now, considering you are back in front of a KGP audience after a while, is there some special KGP memory that you'd like to share with us? Let's start with Tanay since he's been gone the longest.
Give me some time. Let me think about it. Most good memories are hazy for obvious reasons.
Yes. Nice. So, Vasanta, Tiyasha, would somebody like to state out a memory?
I mean, we just graduated. I don't even feel
then
like
it's fresh, right?
Yeah, honestly, it doesn't even feel like I graduated some days because most of my friends are still in KGP. So I feel like, okay.
That's real. There must be something that sticks out, right?
I agree with Tiyasha. Like, yeah, I still hang out with like a lot of. I'm in Bangalore, so like half of KGP is in Bangalore, so I still hang out with the same friends. And I think like the one thing is you would never be able to make the same kind of friends that you've made in college ever in your professional life. So kind of like stick to those people and like do not like let go of those relationships. And yeah, I mean, it really like corporate culture feels like working in a cell or a fest, somebody's on your head all the time. ये करो, वो करो, कल ये submit करना है, परसों ये करना है. Like you start working only when the deadline is like 10, 12 hours away. So it's exactly like college, except you get paid for what you do. So yeah.
Nice. Tanay, have you thought of something yet?
Yeah, no, I think I resonate with them. I think the friendships are what stick out.
Yeah.
And stays important. So I was also in campus a month ago, so I did get to relive a lot of that. But I think having those friends around was sort of important.
So great. So yeah, Abhisha, I think you can take over.
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, we'll have an interactive session with our alumni. So guys, please raise your hand so that I can call out your names and you can ask your questions to the panelists. Yeah. So Pranav Gupta, guys, please let him unmute his mic.
Hello everyone, am I audible?
Yeah, Pranav.
Right. So hi, I'm Pranav. So first of all, thank you for the session. It was really helpful and very insightful. I'm a pre-final year student majoring in mathematics and computing, and I'll be interning in a software firm this summer, which is going to be my first internship in 4 years. So even if I think of applying for an MBA, I'm going to have a tough time justifying my reasons. And as one of the things that was mentioned in the session was that they really look for your motivations. So I know this is a very open-ended questions. What are some things that you all would recommend that I can use to diversify my profile? So should I go for try an internship in consulting or something? And seeing your backgrounds, I'm really thinking of applying as a business analyst at McKinsey & Company.
So maybe I can take that. I do know that there's not a lot of diversity on this panel, but people from different backgrounds do get in. There are people from KGP also who've gotten in with like a tech background, people who are going into tech. So you don't necessarily need to go into consulting to be able to get into these programs, but you do need to be able to show why that MBA will help you where you want to be. Right. So maybe you want to do product management, right? And a lot of people post MBA get into product management at Facebook, Google, Microsoft, all of that, right? So you should have that clarity. Why do you want to do that? And you should be able to show that in your profile. And I mean, if you're saying that you're going to be doing the first internship, just to have more experiences, since all of this is happening remote. I know a lot of my juniors who are doing multiple internships while the semester is going on. So you can maybe do another internship before you're applying. So there's some diversity in terms of experiences. Maybe let's say if you really are keen on product management, you can do a product management internship at one of these startups, and then you can tie that into your story as to how you realized you were doing something, you realized that you want to do product management, you interned at a startup, you really like the experience for XYZ reasons, and hence you want to do an MBA, and these are the ABC gaps that you want to fill through an MBA. So really depends, as everyone was saying, right? You really need to introspect in terms of what you want to do. You need to be authentic, and they'll see through if that authenticity is not there. So you don't really need to follow paths and do XYZ things to be able to get there. There are people from tech backgrounds also who've gotten in. So you don't necessarily need to do consulting.
Yeah, I think from MNC, Anvi got in last year, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
She's in Goldman Sachs. She got in from a tech background. I think another person from IIT Bombay, Shreya, she also got in from a tech background. So there are a lot of people who get in from tech backgrounds. So you just need to justify it, like Tanay said.
Right. Thank you, Tanay and Tiyasha.
Yeah, next we have Adnish.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, good evening, and thanks a lot for this session. I really learned a lot about the program. I just had two doubts. First was yeah, we do know about your admits, but what other colleges did you especially target, and what did you feel you could have done better in terms of getting an admit there, maybe what you thought it was lacking in those colleges? Like I'm asking specifically for Harvard and Stanford, like maybe if you applied to.
Sure. So maybe I can take that. So for Harvard, I really don't know because I think last year people, at least from our batch, from what we knew, nobody really got a call back from Harvard last year. So I don't know if Vasanta can add to that, but that's fun. For Stanford, so I think Stanford's process is a bit of a black box, right? So the first round, we did get an interview. I think 5 people got an interview, but the interview was taken by an alumnus of Stanford, right? So while the interview went well, I think some part of it, like, so what they said was that the interview itself, since it's taken by an alumnus and not an adcom, it plays a significantly less role compared to your overall application. And since they only take maybe like 1-2 people a year, it then depends on whom you are competing with. So I think again, it depends on how many people they are taking, how your application completely compares with other people who are competing from your batch and who are getting selected.
Okay, just an extension on this one. Tanay, you were saying.
No, I was just saying same. Even in my batch, no one got a call from HBS. In the batch previous to me, someone had an admit, but his profile was like 10x better. That is important. I think Stanford, I think one person from my batch got in. I didn't get an invite, so I really don't know what I could have done better. But I do know that, let's say, Stanford, I know that for the last 5 years, they have never taken anyone with a engineering consulting background in the normal route. Engineering, consulting, and investing background. And
I think last year they took one. Last year they took one from IIT Kanpur, but she had a double major. I think she was in Bain.
So engineering, consulting, and investing. So they don't like that profile. And my story was around how I want to do invest in pre-MBA and post-MBA. Yeah. So they never take, even in the normal that thing, they have not taken people, folks from investing background. They have taken, they do focus a lot on entrepreneurship. So maybe if, let's say, my story was around entrepreneurship, I might have had a better chance. I don't know if that person's Vasandra's story would have been about entrepreneurship likely.
Yeah.
She would have made it.
Yeah, probably.
So that's the difference.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so just an extension on it, Tiyasha mentioned like could you just briefly describe like the process after getting a call back? Like are the GDs and the interviews somewhat like what you had faced in consulting, or are they like quite different from that? Like just like, because we have to be prepping on a very short leash there.
I think it's different for every school. So for Wharton, they have a team-based discussion. For, I think, Stanford, they had an interview taken by an alumnus. For the other schools, some were by alumnus, some were by adcom. So I think Kellogg had an adcom interview, as far as I remember. Yeah. Kellogg was adcom. And the questions, so they are more around you itself. So what you have done, how you have achieved things, essentially a very consulting-like interview. At least for me, it was like that. I think the team-based discussion is the only different thing.
Okay, like my core question was, would I be forced to solve a guesstimate?
No.
So
it's a personal interview.
2 cases, just like normal HR questions, they'll ask you about your life. What are the motivations? Why have you made certain decisions? They will grill you on what decisions you've made. Why have you made it? Have you thought those through? Wharton mein you have a GD of sort, but uska topic they give you pehle se. So you have the topic, you prepare on that, and based on that, there's a discussion that happens. You'll know more about the format if you apply and get there. But no like guesstimates or cases or anything like that.
So the second one I had, I'm really sorry, it's quite a long list question. So the second one I had was about the recommendations. So for the recommendations, what would you suggest, getting a person with a good brand or getting a person who is quite entangled in your entire story but is of a nominal brand? Like I have done FTs, so like would you recommend an FT professor I have done like maybe 5-6 months a sprint, or a KGP professor who have been working under for like 1.5 years, 2 years kind of?
I personally would recommend people who know you well and who can like write a personal recommendation for you rather than a general one.
Yeah. So even let's say when I was thinking through, I had 2 options. One was just my immediate manager at Aliki and asking a partner at LEK who I didn't get a chance to work with as long. So I was thinking maybe since he's a partner, I should ask him, but I ended up going with the manager. But he knew me really well. Like we were super close. So he was obviously able to craft a better story, bring more anecdotes onto the table. So people, especially at this stage, I would look at things differently. If you were applying 4 years later, you might want to focus on like brands, all of that, and like who's really recommending. But right now, I think people who know you well, who can talk about your leadership skills, are the right choices. And I think it should be pretty easy. Whoever can sort of brag about you and whoever loves you, you should pick them.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yashasvi, you can go next.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, hi, thank you so much for the session. So my question was, let's say if I apply for the top 3-4 B schools for deferred programs, and in case I don't get in, does it affect my chances for getting in through a normal MBA route? Just wanted to ask that. And another thing was that I had heard that some consulting firms like BCG, they sponsor like normal MBA programs. Do other firms also sponsor MBA programs? And in case you're getting accepted into a deferred MBA, do they sponsor that as well?
Yeah. So if you're applying, you don't get in, it doesn't affect your application. I know multiple people who applied to HPS 2+2 didn't get in, applied 4 years later, got in. So I don't think it matters. I also spoke to multiple people about it, and they all told me that it doesn't matter, shouldn't matter. About sponsorship, yes, there are options. So McKinsey, you will have to work for at least 2 years, which is 24 months. You will get a return offer. Then you can do anything else. Then go for an MBA. Then you'll have to come back and work at McKinsey for 2 years, and they will sort of pay your tuition fee. So that's 150, 160K. That's 70% of the cost. So they'll pay it 50% across 2 years. So that's how typically, at least at McKinsey, that's how it works. Should be similar at BCG Bain.
Yeah. McKinsey, it also depends on which office you are. So, like, for example, if you do an Indian MBA at McKinsey, then you get the equivalent of like an ISB tuition fee. If you shift to the US office, then there are some caveats depending on that.
Yeah, so there's some way around. I can
yeah,
get that return offer, and then I can say that I want to switch to the US office. I apply to the US office, and most people will get into the US office, and that's where they'll pay. Basically, the limit is the maximum tuition fee of the MBA school in that country. So for India, it's ISB. For US, it's going to be maybe MIT or something.
Okay, thanks a lot. Do they sponsor deferred programs also? Because...
Yeah. No, the same program. I mean, there's no difference. Same MBA.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Shivraj, like you can go next.
Hello, good evening. First of all, thanks for the session. My question for the panel is like, could you please shed some lights on management consulting profile as far as long-term career is concerned?
Tiyasha, do you want to take that?
I don't really know. Like, what kind of view do you want on management consulting? I mean, can you just clarify a little bit more? I mean, what?
Like, basically, like in the previous placement session, I got into the profile of management consulting. So I wanted to know some bits about like if you guys have any idea regarding the same.
As in, what is the sort of work? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, exactly.
So I can give a brief view from what I know in 6 months, but I think Tanay will probably know better. So I think the work is very diversified. It depends on what industry you're working in, right? So right now I have worked across two sectors. One is in the financial services, and right now I'm working on sustainability. The work is extremely different in both, and it again depends on the kind of project you have. So it also depends on understanding. So for example, for me, I had to work in a bank in the previous project, and that there I had to learn a lot about banking, how to like improve their loan book, etc. Right? And in this particular project, it's more related to sustainability, how like solar plants work, how like renewable energy works, and how you can improve that. So again, very diversified work, depends on what industry you are going into.
Yeah, so really depends on which industry you're working in. I've also done a lot of sustainability building. Let's say, how should a renewable energy company think about how should they target like commercial and industrial customers? So I built their entire strategy of how should they be thinking about it. I've done some sustainability strategy for a traditional company. How should they think about, let's say, reducing their emissions? I've done some consumer tech work. There was a Sri Lankan player. We were looking at how do we improve their distribution efficiency? How do we get beverages and ice creams faster at a lower cost to let's say 80,000 outlets in Sri Lanka. So really depends on across different sectors. You work on problems across different functions, marketing or operations or stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really sounds good. Thank you for your suggestion.
Yeah, thank you guys for the questions, and I hope they got answered. So that was a very informative session, and I hope everyone had a great time learning about deferred MBAs. Yeah, and this brings us to the end of the session. It's been so wonderful listening to you all. I would like to thank all our esteemed alumni for taking out time from their busy schedules and coming here. I thank everyone on behalf of the students alumni self for your time and cooperation and for making this event a success.